I want to talk about OPEC and Quid Pro Joe. What is the story here? It's a little confusing to most people. Walk us through it with your foreign policy expertise.
So the timeline on this is important, right? So over the summer when gas prices were getting really bad, Joe Biden and his crack team at the White House decided to go over to something called the Strategic Oil Reserve. They're these giant caverns down in the Louisiana Bayou. They're underneath the Louisiana Bayou, these actually salt caverns, limestone. One of them used to be owned by Morton Salt. Really interesting story. And we, in the 1970s, our country started filling these up as a reserve in case OPEC ever conducted another embargo against the United States or ever looked to cut production. Pay attention to that because that's going to come up later. So Biden decided that he didn't like where his approval numbers were. So what did he do? He started releasing oil from the Strategic Oil Reserve into the markets, and prices dipped for a little bit, but now they're back on the upswing again. So last week, Biden calls for OPEC to increase their production. And of course, we remember he goes over there. He has the fist bump with MBS, who's the crown prince that's basically in charge of Saudi right now. Saudi Arabia's government is basically run by Game of Thrones. It's Game of Thrones rules over there. So the king is pretty much he's down, but he's not out yet completely. But MBS is
the prince is really running the government.
Yeah, the prince is running things. So just if you've seen Game of Thrones, that's basically how they run Saudi Arabia. And so OPEC Plus last week comes out and says, you know what? We're actually not going to increase production. We're going to decrease production. Joe, we're very sorry about that. We don't like the things that you've been doing. We've decided that we're going to push off. And Charlie, you had Steve Bannon on here yesterday for that incredible discussion about the collapse of the Anglo-American financial system worldwide. This is part and parcel of that because, of course, everyone knows that system. And maybe we should do some more episodes explaining this for people. It's backed by the petrodollar. It's backed by the fact that all oil transactions, petroleum, LNG, must be conducted around the world in U.S. currency, even if the United States is not involved in the transaction. Obviously, this creates an artificial demand for U.S. dollars. So when the Saudis tell Joe to pound sand over this, Biden comes back, and the Wall Street Journal reports this last week. They say, okay, if you're going to do it, can you at least delay it 1 month? Can you delay it 1 month? Well, Charlie, we've all got calendars.
I wonder why.
What's 1 month from now, right? We're actually less, only about, 2.5 weeks, depending on account, from the election. So obviously he's saying you need to delay this until after the election. Then Biden goes on Jake Tapper's program. The thing drops over the weekend to sit down with Jake Tapper. He says to Tapper's face that we've asked them to postpone this. He then says there will be consequences if they do not agree to our demands. Tapper says, what consequences? And he says, oh, Jake, consequences. We then hear Ro Khanna on Monday. We hear Blumenthal come out as well and say, we will drop the military sales to Saudi Arabia. This is congressionally appointed military sales. I'm going to put aside the issue of whether we should be doing that right now, but just to point out, this was approved by Congress. This is something we've been doing for a very long time. And they asked Joe Biden about this while he's on the lawn, while he's walking into the White House. And he says, yes, we are going to look at that when Congress comes back after the elections. And so I'm just sitting there watching all of this and saying, well, wait a minute, isn't this the exact same thing that President Trump was impeached for? The only third impeachment that we've ever had in the United States of America, U.S. history, was over coercing. Remember their allegation, not what the facts were, but their allegation. And they had the whistleblower. His name was Eric Ciaramella, by the way. The whistleblower. Then they had Vindman, and Vindman had a feeling. He had a strong feeling. Remember, he had a rustling in his jimmies that Trump was trying to coerce, and Zelensky, right? Of course, it was Zelensky. Just amazing how the same names keep coming back up again and again. So Zelensky and Trump are having this phone call. Trump says, I need you to look into this guy, Joe Biden. He's up to no good in Burisma. I want to see if there's anything you can find out about that. You're there. Let's talk to the prosecutor general. Earlier, we know there was another situation where a prosecutor general had been fired in Ukraine that may or may not have actually been looking in to Hunter Biden and this Burisma company. So they impeached Trump over that, and they claimed it was over withholding military aid to Ukraine. We're now hearing Joe Biden publicly state that he is planning to withhold military aid from Saudi Arabia, again, congressionally approved, if they do not essentially lower the price of oil, which would lower the price of gas going into the election. Now, all of this is flying around on social media, and it's like I'm the only person in America that actually connects the dots on it. And then suddenly the Saudis come out last night with this giant statement. It looks like they wrote it on a scroll, if you see this thing. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and you don't usually see them put out statements like this, where they completely confirm everything that went on and they publicly reject the offer. They say, we will not delay this 1 month. The White House, Karine Jean-Pierre, has been trying to walk it back. But now what's incredible, I'm waiting for the fact check. I'm waiting for Reuters to come out and say, Posobiec is, reading between the lines too much again. The AP and the Wall Street Journal, as of this morning, 4 hours ago, have both come out and completely corroborated everything I reported.